All right, let's dive right into this explainer by validating a massive frustration that honestly, I think we've all felt at some point. You know the feeling, right? The sheer maddening vulnerability of our delicate, carefully tended garden vegetables. I mean, you literally do everything right. You amend the soil, you water deeply, you baby these plants. And yet, you're still entirely at the mercy of the weather, pests, and just the sheer biological fragility of the stuff we usually choose to grow. And there's this really stark, almost funny contrast between the veggies we basically have to coddle to survival and the unforgiving environments they're up against. Think about it. Our tomatoes need staking. Our cucumbers get completely wrecked by powdery mildew if the humidity shifts even a tiny bit. And our spinach, yeah, it bolts at the very first sign of June heat. But on the flip side, we have this brutal environment out there. Degraded soil, blistering direct sun, severe drought. You'd think absolutely nothing could survive that, let alone thrive. But there's a biological marvel that actually loves the absolute worst conditions imaginable. Now, I thought I knew all the heavy hitters of traditional food forests, but discovering a plant that can grow 15 feet in a single season with almost zero water, that was a deeply validating moment for me. It doesn't just survive, it literally explodes out of the dirt. And get this, practically the entire thing is edible. We're talking the leaves, the pods, the flowers, and even the roots. So, section 1. Let's officially meet the Moringa tree, the nutritional powerhouse. We're talking about Moringa oleifera, though you might also hear it called the drumstick tree or the horseradish tree. Traditional cultures across India, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa have cultivated this for centuries. And honestly, once you see what it provides, you'll immediately get why. Moringa's nutritional profile seriously doesn't even look real when you first read it. Gram for gram, these leaves pack 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, 4 times the calcium of milk, and 4 times the vitamin A of carrots. It's an absolute powerhouse. But here is the absolute game changer. It is one of the only plants on Earth that gives you a complete protein. It actually contains all 9 essential amino acids, right alongside massive amounts of vitamins, and 3 times the potassium of bananas. And unlike our fussy garden greens, when the heat spikes and the rain just completely stops, Moringa doesn't wither. It just pushes out more leaves. It completely solves the problem of growing nutrient-dense, free food right in your backyard. The science behind this resilience is just fascinating. Botanically speaking, Moringa is what we call a pioneer species. It's essentially a biological anchor designed to be the very first thing to grow in hostile, ruined soils. It throws down this incredibly deep taproot to access water tables that regular garden veggies could never ever reach. Plus, its specialized cellular structure minimizes water loss while maximizing photosynthesis. So yeah, it can just sit there in blistering direct sun and be totally fine. I actually remember putting my sponge down at the kitchen sink when this hit me. It's the huge elephant in the room. If this tree solves every problem, provides complete protein, and needs almost no water, why on earth isn't it sitting right in the center of every local nursery and big box store? Well, to understand the agricultural industry's huge blind spot here, we've got to look at a concept called the winner's history problem. Basically, the food market we've inherited is entirely dictated by the logistics of our global shipping system. The plants that conquered your grocery aisles, they aren't there because they're the most nutritious or the most resilient. They are simply the ones that happen to survive the brutal logistics of transport. Take the supermarket tomato. It wasn't bred for exceptional flavor or nutrition. No, it was bred with a thick skin so it could survive a 3,000-mile truck ride without getting bruised. Moringa leaves, on the other hand, are incredibly fragile. Once you pick them, they start to wilt and break down within hours. You simply cannot put fragile moringa leaves in a plastic clamshell, load them onto a refrigerated truck in California, and expect to sell them in New York 3 weeks later. They just won't survive the trip. So it completely failed the logistics test. We've built this massive global food system that prioritizes veggies that can just sit on a shelf for 3 weeks, rather than a tree that can literally keep an entire community alive for free. Commercial agriculture ignored moringa because it can't be easily commodified as fresh produce, unless, of course, you dry it and grind it into an expensive supplement powder. All right, section 2, growing in any climate, solving the hardiness zone puzzle. Now, you might be thinking, okay, great, but there is no way I can grow a tropical tree in Ohio or the UK. But the secret to growing it in a colder climate is to simply treat it as an annual. Because it grows up to 15 feet in a single summer, you just start the seeds indoors like you would with peppers. Soak those weird winged pea-sized seeds in water for 24 hours to break their dormancy, and plant them in deep pots about 6 weeks before your last frost.
When summer hits, transplant it to the absolute hottest, most unforgiving spot in your yard. You know, the place where your lettuce normally goes to die. But here's the absolute most important thing. Do not overwater it. Fast-draining soil is non-negotiable here, guys. Waterlogged roots will kill this plant instantly.
And if you want maximum yield, you've got to use a traditional management technique called coppicing. Now, I know it feels completely wrong to chop the head off a plant you've been babying all spring, literally cutting the main trunk in half at about 4 feet tall, but trust me on this. Moringa actually thrives on aggressive pruning. When you cut that central leader, it forces out aggressive lateral branching. It essentially turns a giant bean pole into a continuous harvest bush, giving you an exponential amount of leaves right at waist height, all the way until the first frost. And when it comes time to store your harvest, how you dry it matters immensely. If you dry them out in a sunny window, like regular herbs, the UV light actually strips the vitamin A and degrades the beta-carotene, leaving you with pale, yellow, basically dead plant matter. If you want to keep that bioavailable nutrition shelf-stable for your winter smoothies, you absolutely must use a counterintuitive shade drying technique. Bundling them in a dark, warm, ventilated room keeps the leaves a vibrant, dark emerald green. It literally is the difference between dead leaves and a true superfood. Moving on to Section 3, the water purification secret, the 30-second detail. Okay, I need 30 seconds of your absolute, undivided attention right now, because this next part is what made global scientists truly sit up and take notice. When you look at studies from the UN and major agricultural universities, they confirm an almost unbelievable statistic. Crushed moringa seeds can remove between 90 and 99% of bacteria in untreated, completely dirty water. Here's exactly how it works. You harvest and dry the mature seeds from those long, ribbed pods and crush them into a superfine powder. When you mix that powder into a bucket of murky, bacteria-laden water, naturally occurring cationic proteins act as a biological coagulant. They bind to the dirt, the algae, the bacteria, and they clump them into heavy masses called flocks. These flocks just sink straight to the bottom. This isn't just a neat little party trick. It's a brazenly efficient natural system doing the heavy lifting of chemical water purification entirely for free. Which brings us to Section 4, rethinking our food system, working within nature. There's this quote, "We haven't conquered nature. We've just ignored the best parts of it because they didn't fit nicely into a shipping container." And man, does that perfectly encapsulate the reality of our modern agricultural system. Once you realize this incredibly efficient plant exists, you start looking at the entire grocery store produce aisle differently. Indigenous cultures who cultivated plants like moringa for thousands of years, they didn't fight a war of attrition against nature. They didn't drag hoses around or rely on synthetic fertilizers to force delicate plants to survive. They worked within the system to find the robust plants that actually wanted to live. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Moringa is really just one plant we found when we looked at tropical dryland trees. It's just one out of thousands that traditional cultures have relied on. So if a tree that can literally purify water and provide complete protein was almost completely forgotten just because it didn't fit into a shipping container, what other hidden marvels of the natural world are we currently ignoring?